light is really, really bright in my face, but I kind of like it, you know, like natural sunlight. LOL. Hi guys, and welcome back to Book It. I'm your host Sav, and today we're going to be talking about another autobiography that I have most recently finished, which is Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing by Matthew Perry. Oh my gosh, such a good book. Literally like loved. So let's go ahead and just dive right in. For those that don't know, Matthew Perry was a star of the TV show Friends, which ran like for so long, and everybody, it's like one of those beloved shows, like it's just original. And he played Chandler Bing, which was like a sarcastic, funny, he worked in corporate, but he was like the like jokester of the group and stuff like that. And everyone loved him and could relate to him. So the autobiography that Matthew Perry recently wrote was very heartbreaking, and like it just talks about his like struggles with addiction and how he was struggling on and off screen. So he talked about how he lived in sober living from like back in the day, like back in the 90s, and then when he would live in sober living, it would be worse because then he would, at some point, he would relapse, whether that was alcohol or drugs or pills, whatever he was on. And then, you know, so he started the book out basically by having a foreword written by Lisa Kudrow, who played Phoebe in Friends. And she says, like, Matthew's a very strong person. He's been through a lot. Like, don't read this book just to, like, don't judge him. But, like, he did go through a lot, you know, stuff like that. It was a very nice foreword that she wrote. And then he starts off by talking about like his childhood. He's like, I had a good childhood. My parents were divorced. I had a very young mom, and he lived with her in Canada until he came out to California because his dad was an actor and he wanted to be an actor too and follow his father's footsteps. As we all know, he achieves that goal and becomes an actor. So he talks about when he was on drugs, and there was one part where he did not technically die. He didn't die, but he did have 5 minutes where he flatlined. So he tells everybody to like take the book and like put the book down and go do something, play on your phone, read something else, just like sit there and think for 5 minutes and then come back and pick the book up. And then when you go and you pick the book back up, the first sentence is like something along the lines of like, yeah, you didn't think it was that long, but it was a lot longer than you thought. Which was like very, I don't know, during that time, like I got on TikTok because I was like, okay, 5 minutes, I'll get on TikTok. And then I was like, okay, like, you know, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And like, I was watching the clock kind of like, you know, but that was really, really sad. He also talks about his earlier stages before he was on Friends. He was actually not supposed to be in the original cast of Friends. He was supposed to be doing a show about a space futuristic bellhop. I know, it sounds so stupid. And he talks about how like he's supposed to be in this, and like they had already shot like the pilot and they were like trying to get it picked up, and because of that contract that he had signed with them, he was not allowed to even audition for Friends. And then he talks about how he was out with one friend one night. It was like him and two of his buddies, and that guy had auditioned for Chandler Bing and had gotten a call from the producers to actually sign on and be Chandler Bing. And Matthew talks about how upset he was about this, but he was really trying to be supportive. And his friend was like, yeah, it's between the show Friends, where I'll be Chandler Bing, or another show called Best Friends, which there's a lot of Friends things going on in the 90s. And then they like discussed what they should do, and Matthew told his friend, I think you should go for the show Friends. I think you should be Chandler Bing. I think it's a really good opportunity. I really want it, but like, you know, if I can't have it, at least you do. And his friend calls his agent and actually goes to the producers of Friends and declines the Chandler Bing and says that he's going to go ahead and do the show Best Friends, which never ended up getting off the ground. The pilot was never picked up. So Perry talks about how right after he found out that his friend declined the role of Chandler Bing, he ran home and he begged for a chance to audition, and he stayed up and he made a bunch of tapes of him saying lines and stuff like that. Everything that like I don't know, like I don't act, I'm not an actor, so I don't know, but like a bunch of like the blue, like, you know, where you stand in front of like a camera and you talk and you do different voices and stuff like that. Yeah. He did one of those and sent it in, and luckily his agent was able to get him an audition, and thank God he did. But he was cast in Friends, and he was able to get out of his contract with the futuristic bellhop or whatever, just because it was like not being picked up by another, like it wasn't being picked up. And then he discusses that during the running of Friends, you see Chandler's like weight fluctuate a lot, and he becomes kind of a different person. Like each season he's slightly different, and Matthew does talk about that. He says that in like the earlier seasons when he's a bigger guy, not season 1 or season 2, but like season 3 or 4ish, when he's a bigger guy, he was addicted to alcohol and he could not stop drinking, and he was drinking even on the set, to the point where other co-stars were talking to him about it. He mentions that Jennifer Aniston does approach him one day and is like, hey, just so you know, like, we thought you were sober. And he's like, oh, I am sober. And she's like, Matthew, you're not. Like, we all know you're not. Like, please don't lie to us. And then he talks about how later on in the seasons when he gets really thin, he was actually on drugs and in and out of rehabs and sober living, trying to get that under control. And then the season where he had the goatee, he stated he was 100% on different pills, anything he could get his hands on. And the cast members were worried about it, and he understands why they, like, as time went on, why they, like, spaced themselves away from him, why they took themselves out and, like, you know, gave themselves some distance. He understands that completely. He discusses how he's been, like, mostly sober, he says. He's been mostly sober since 2001. And then in 2019, he fell into a coma. Because he was taking 1,800 milligrams of opiates a day. 1,800. And he was not able to get high off of that. And they gave him a 2% survival rate because he was in a coma and they didn't think he was going to make it. But he was able to pull through. He made it. He obviously survived. He's still alive to this day. Time of recording, he's alive. And yeah, then he like goes on, just mentions like a bunch of other short things here and there, how when after he was confronted by the Jennifer Aniston, he took a movie deal in Canada so he could like immediately leave and didn't have to like stay with them during their off season of like them like not filming. He talks about how he was set up on a date with Cameron Diaz and she punched him in the face. That's just enough said about Matthew Perry. And then later on, he doesn't talk about this in the book, but it did occur in the reunion that Friends did a couple years back. I want to say 2020, 2021, whatever. A couple years back when they did a Friends reunion, they all like, you know, came and sat down and they were talking, and, you know, there was a one part where they were like, oh, do you guys all still keep in contact? And the girls were like, yeah, we still talk to everybody, blah, blah, blah. And Matthew makes a comment like, oh, well, you guys don't talk to me. And it was like really awkward on screen. It was really awkward for everyone. And then he goes on later on to talk about how like they took care of him for so long during the time that they were all together and when they were working and when they were at their height of their career, stuff like that. Like, it was very hard for them to be trying to get their own careers off the ground and make sure he was okay. So he understands why, as they got older, they all drifted apart from him. He said that he understands that like they were all together and they went through something that like no one else has ever gone through before, because it's like a bonding thing, and you know, no one lived the experiences they did. But he understands that they all stepped aside because they could not. It's not that they couldn't deal with what he was going through. It was more of just like he says something like, there comes a certain time when you have to stop taking care of somebody to like benefit your own good, which is very like sad to think about. But yeah, this book was so good. The whole, like, after the foreword that was written by Lisa Kudrow, he has like an intro prologue, and these are like my favorite quotes just because it's like, it's very Matthew Perry-esque. At the very end of the first chapter, he writes like, this is a very sad book. These are about my struggles, blah, blah. Also, I'm Batman, and leaves it at that. And then later on at the very end of the book, he's like, so no matter like whatever you're going through, like everything will get better. Someday you too might be called upon to do something important, so be ready for it. And when whatever happens, just think, what would Batman do? And do that. I think that's just really funny just because like throughout the entire book he mentions like, you know, I don't know, but he talks about how it was very rough for him. He talks in depth about the sober living and about seeing people, and then in the book he has like a bunch of like photos like throughout, like in the middle it's like photos of him as a child, him growing up, him playing sports. My favorite caption is this one. This little one, it says, "Me at the age of 38 years old." I think that's, I don't know why I laughed so hard at that. But then as we get more into it, he has like photos of like the friends, people, and maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I thought he did, for sure thought he did. Oh, here's him as the show, the like space bellhop one that he almost didn't get friends for because he was doing whatever the hell that is. Oh, here's him and Lisa Kudrow. You know, she wrote the foreword. I love this photo because I didn't know that they knew each other, but when you think about it, it makes sense. For those who don't know, this is Lauren Graham. She is the one of the two main characters of the show Gilmore Girls, and that is like that's my favorite show. I didn't know that, but here's a photo of all of them, minus Lisa. You know, poor kiddos. And he even says like it's the best job in the world. And then here's his very first headshot and very last one. So it's very like, it was a very sad book. It really did make me like kind of like upset because I watched Friends. A lot of people watch Friends. It was a show that was very popular. It still is to this day. You can rewatch it like literally almost anywhere. People are always rewatching it. It's one of those comfort shows you just watch on it over and over again. And it just really makes you sad because Chandler Bing was always my favorite character. Like, I related to Chandler. He was sarcastic, he was a little weird, but like he was like funny. He like had some serious childhood issues that he like joked about a lot, whatever. And then he was actually going through all this stuff at the same time. So Matthew Perry's book, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing, on the Book It scale, he gets 4 out of 5 stars. I know, it's not what people were expecting because I did rave about this book. I don't really see anything negative about this book, but there were some parts in the book where I kind of got lost. Like I kind of was like, not really feeling it. That's why. Nothing about his story or anything at all. I did love Matthew Perry. I do love Matthew Perry. This was a very good book. So 4 out of 5 stars. Yeah, that's about it for this one. I think I have one more autobiography that I'm currently reading. Other than that, it's like back to like the fiction, fantasy, you know, some money things. So just bear with me. I have a couple more things. So yeah. And that's it. So until next time, bye.